I myself am also a rare disease mom. So I had a son with an MPS disorder. And unfortunately, he passed away 10 years ago. So I bring that perspective as well to the job that I do. Parents have an awful lot to learn from other parents. Our platform brings the voices of other parents to more parents through video interviews and blogs. So those are just two of the things that we have on our website in order to let parents hear from other parents. There's no one we trust more than another parent going through the same thing that we're going through.
We keep mentioning the words anticipatory grief. It's sometimes helpful when we put a name to that feeling because then we're able to recognize it and do something about it.
So anticipatory grief is that grief that you feel before the actual event unfolds.
Welcome, AGS allies and caregivers. You are listening to the Rare Advocates podcast brought to you by Aicardi Goutieres Syndrome Advocacy Association, and a special thanks to our sponsor, Biogen. I'm Betty, your host, and a mom of two boys, one of them who has Aicardi Goutieres syndrome. Join us for insightful conversations and updates here on the podcast where we talk about Aicardi Goutieres syndrome, rare diseases, and disabilities. Now, don't miss out on the conversation, so please subscribe to wherever you're listening to us from, leave us a review, and share with others. We're here to support you on every step of your journey. And today we have Jennifer. Hi, Jennifer. How are you doing?
I'm good. How about yourself today?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining. I am really excited to get to know you a little bit better and to get to know Courageous Parents Network a little bit better. So tell me, what do you do for Courageous Parents Network?
Sure. So officially, I am the Director of Community Engagement, which means that I get the privilege of interacting with many of the parents who seek resources through Courageous Parents Network, and primarily with patient organizations who are supporting those families as they're journeying this with their child. I myself am also a rare disease mom. So I had a son with an MPS disorder. And unfortunately, he passed away 10 years ago. So I bring that perspective as well to the job that I do.
Yes. And I've mentioned this before, and I'm sorry we're meeting this way, but I'm thankful you still do this and you still advocate for families, and beyond that, you're bringing your own personal experience that it's hard, but very meaningful.
Yes. I mean, I would think of it as a way for me to almost continue my relationship with my son, Benjamin, even after he has passed away, because he inspired me to do so much while I was tending with him. And I know all the parents listening here today are going to understand this, that one of the things we want to do is make sure that the impact that our child's lives have had on us can inform and enhance the lives of other families as we're moving through this. And so the inspiration behind that is, of course, generated in the hearts of our own children. And I feel like it's my privilege to do this work.
Yes. Is that what inspired you to join CPN?
I think I was interviewed originally by the founder of Courageous Parents Network. My husband and I both were interviewed alongside our palliative care doctor to talk about the experiences of how palliative care changed the trajectory of my son's life. And it was shortly thereafter that Blythe Lord, the founder, whose daughter herself had Tay-Sachs, approached me about working for Courageous Parents Network. And I think I had in the end, in the later years of Benjamin's life, recognized that families really need additional support to understand the psychosocial and emotional things that they're going through. And, I guess my best example of that is I'm not even sure. I know I didn't know the word anticipatory grief when I was caring for my son, Ben. I know I was experiencing it all the time, but I didn't have the language to express what I was experiencing. And part of what we do at CPN is to offer families an opportunity to learn the language and empower them to feel like they can be being the best parent that they can be for their child.
Yes. So you talked a little bit about this. So who started Courageous Parents Network and when did it start?
So in April, we'll mark our 10th anniversary. So
Wow.
we're gonna have a year-long celebration to see how far we've come, and how much more we can do, because I think that's really important as well to look to the future. But Courageous Parents Network was founded by Blythe Lord. She is the mom to 3 children, just like me. And her middle daughter, Cameron, had Tay-Sachs disease, which that disease has a very long or short trajectory. Unlike me, my son Benjamin lived to be nearly 18, and Cameron passed away in her second year. Um, Blythe had a unique experience, and she realized that what made her come out as a more resilient parent was the support of a good therapist, and a provider who practiced palliative aware medicine. It happened to be her pediatrician, not a palliative care doctor. And in a rare occurrence, her brother-in-law and sister-in-law also had a child with Tay-Sachs. And so she had the opportunity to see what they were going through, because their son was more advanced in the disease and passed away before her daughter. And she recognized that parents have an awful lot to learn from other parents.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of the inspiration or driving seed behind CPN. And that's why our platform brings the voices of other parents to more parents through video interviews and blogs. So those are just two of the things that we have on our website in order to let parents hear from other parents. You know,
Yes.
this is true, right? There's no one we trust more than another parent going through the same thing that we're going through.
Yes, I respect my doctors and I appreciate my doctors so much, but I oftentimes go check on different groups and with different parents what they think about what the doctor said. And it's not like I'm going to do what the other parents are saying, but it does give me that peace of mind that someone said, hey, we've done that. And it's just kind of like, it doesn't take the burden away. It doesn't make things better, but it does make me feel better.
So this is one of the things I love about Courageous Parents Network, because we offer the voices of so many parents. And by the way, we also have clinicians on our website, so you can go on and listen to different providers from clergy to child life specialists to palliative care doctors to genetic counselors. You can go on and listen to them speak about their roles caring for other families. But one of the things, and I think you hit on this when you talked about going to your different groups and listening to other parents, is I like to say at Courageous Parents Network, because you can go on and listen to other parents, especially when you're at those critical decision-making points, which are often the points at which we feel the highest amount of stress. And you can listen to the different decisions that other parents have made, and sort of try on different hats. Which one resonated with you? Which one do you relate to? Did they help you identify maybe a goal that you weren't aware of that you had for your child, because they spoke the words that you needed to put it sort of out there in the space? So, our videos we have a lot of videos and resources for parents at different decision inflection points, things like choosing a feeding tube or a trach, many of the medical interventions that kids have, but equally decision points like, how do I communicate with the grandparents or the extended family? Because those are also complications in this whole journey too. So it really runs the gamut, but I love that CPN offers families that chance to sort of figure out what resonates with their own goals of care.
Yes. So courageousparentsnetwork.org is a platform and it offers many resources. Is it just for US or is it global?
Well, I mean, I would argue that we all have these common occurrences, right? Our children are facing many of the same things. And so at CPN, well, we do feature and identify families by different diagnoses. We try to lean into the disease agnostic components of the rare disease journey. So, everybody is struggling to support their well children or their marriage. People are grappling with anticipatory grief. They might be figuring out, how do I practice shared decision making with my physician, and all of these are universal. So we currently only have our resources available in Spanish.
Okay.
But again, with it's not ideal, but with YouTube Translate, you can actually engage with the video content as well. So we are U.S. based, but we hope that, and we know that families across the globe are using our resources.
Yes, and this is very important because our listeners are all over, and I don't want them to be discouraged that if we present with a resource, it's just limited to the US unless we say otherwise. So I want to make sure they know from the beginning that it's open, and they do have, like you said, English and Spanish resources as well. And so if you could please highlight, because we've mentioned a couple of sprinkles of resources here and there, some of the key resources. Let's talk about like newly diagnosed families, like, because I feel like everyone is on a similar journey, but just in different parts of the journey. And so let's start with newly diagnosed families. Like, what are some key resources and services that you would recommend for the newly diagnosed?
So on Courageous Parents Network, and again, we are a digital platform. So we're a nonprofit, but we provide digital tools for families, and we don't do any direct service providing. So we don't host support groups. We do have monthly webinars that bring different topics to light, and you can engage in the conversations during those. We host them as Zoom meetings, so there's an opportunity to have a dialogue during those events. But the way we bring our resources to families are, again, through the video interviews, through blogs. We have a vast amount of guides on a wide range of things. As I mentioned, shared decision making, the siblings. It could be something on if your child has to have an intervention like a cardiology or tracheostomy, some of those major medical complications that you might find yourself experiencing. We, of course, for the newly diagnosed, have guides on anticipatory grief. We also feature something called guided pathways, and these are sort of like little step-by-step learning opportunities where you can explore a concept like anticipatory grief with some chances to pause and reflect on how you feel about what's going on and what you're learning. So that's another tool that we bring to families that helps them sort of walk along the path and make those gradual steps along the way.
Yeah.
We also have I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say the guides is something I didn't know you offered. This is great.
Yes, we just released a new one today that I think is very helpful on, what do you do if you feel as though your clinician isn't listening when you're having a dialogue about something, and it sort of gives suggestions and a little bit of a transcript or ways that you can ask to receive that information differently. So sort of helpful dialogue that you might engage in with your clinician. And we have a lot of guides on that offer that assistance. So as you're managing how to negotiate the hospital, we have one on that. If your family is considering a clinical trial, we have a guide on what to think about with regard to those opportunities. Certainly, again, as I mentioned, around all of those interventions, but even guides on something, as I said before, as simple as, how do I engage my friends in having this conversation with me? Because sometimes that's really hard too.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much information that, you might not need it all at the beginning, but it's so nice that it's there because, like I mentioned just a few seconds ago, it takes time to digest, takes time to get sometimes to be like, okay, well, I just received that diagnosis. Now I have to explain it to the family. So maybe that wasn't your first thought, but that maybe your second or third thought. And it's very, very hard. And, we keep mentioning the words anticipatory grief. And we've actually have not described this before on the podcast. So maybe in your own personal experience, or if there's a definition already through CPN that you want to share, let's go ahead and just talk about it just a little bit, because I don't want to ever assume that everyone knows what we're talking about, and I don't want anyone to feel alone. It's sometimes helpful when we put a name to that feeling, because then we're able to recognize it and do something about it.
Yeah, so we have sort of two unofficial mottos at CPN, but one of them is you have to name it to tame it. So one of the things we do is we try to expose families to the language that either medical professionals are using with them, or that will help them identify the feelings that they're having. So as you said, they can feel less alone. So anticipatory grief is that grief that you feel before the actual event unfolds. So, many of the families that come to CPN, their children have serious illnesses where the outcome may not necessarily be known. And all of them have been cast into a situation where the life that they had sort of thought they were going to have has been drastically altered. And in that altercation, there are things that we grieve. So it could be something as simple as my child might not be able to ever ride a bicycle. And I'm now having this, grief for, in my own instance, by the way, it was for my two boys who wouldn't share that experience. And that feeling is what we call anticipatory grief. So it's all of those, I like to call them sometimes all of those nevers that come around. And how can we, the important part of recognizing anticipatory grief is it helps you to bring forward and reevaluate your identity as a parent and your hopes as a parent. So this is also really important, and what we try to stress at CPN, that hope is not static. It's not a singular thing. And that we as parents do have the capacity to redefine it and re-find it. There might be moments where you feel like it's elusive, but we actually have the capacity to bring it closer to our hearts again. And we just try at CPN to expose families to the language and tools they need in order to be able to accomplish that.
I'm speechless because, as we talk about it, it brings up those feelings. And I didn't know I was going through anticipatory grief for the longest time until someone actually put a name to it. And that motto, name it to tame it, I mean, that sums up a lot of feelings for me. So if I were someone, I am that someone, but if I were to, wanted to search for resources in regards to anticipatory grief, can you name like one or two things that maybe, the person who's listening to this podcast can go after the podcast and search through CPN?
Sure. So I would say look at who you are and how much you want to digest. One of the really nice attributes of CPN, because we are a digital resource, you can approach it at any time. It's not like a support group where you're sitting there with another individual and you're sort of on the spot. If what you're listening to or reading starts to cause you upset, you can turn it off. You can return to it when you need to. So, this is some of the benefit of listening digitally. It's available in the middle of the night. If you wake up in the middle of the night and you feel anxiety about something and you need to explore it, it's there as a resource to you. We do have a couple of things. We have a whole unit on anticipatory grief, so you can get everything we have. If that's too much, if you go in our video library, you can just watch a series of videos that's just about the beginning. So if you're in those early stages, it might only talk about anticipatory grief that you feel sort of post-diagnosis. If you're a person who needs a more linear learning style, we have a guide, of course, on anticipatory grief, and many, many, many parents on CPN have written blogs about their anticipatory grief. And so one of those parents might be the voice that most resonates with you. So We try to offer different learning styles, in all the mediums that we have. And it's primarily our guides that are available in Spanish.
Wow. This is supposed to be about me, but I think everyone is going to relate to this. So I'm very thankful for you explaining it in such a detail, because that's something that we all need. We can turn it off. We can see how we learned about it, and we can just pick it up when we're ready. And those middle of the nights where you get those feelings that sometimes are a little bit stronger, sometimes the only way that might go away is to actually look it up. So this is perfect. So if I'm correct, you also have a mobile app as well, correct?
Yes, we do, because we recognize that families like us are often spending a lot of time on the go, in the car, at the doctor's office, sitting by the bedside in the hospital with their child. And we wanted to make it most effective for families to access our information as best they can. One really unique feature that we have on our mobile app that mostly is utilized by clinicians, but I'll explain how a family might be able to use it. We have the capacity we have it on our web app too, but on the mobile, it's much easier to use, to bundle a couple of resources from our website and either text message them or email them out to somebody. So how could that be useful? I'll give you one example from my life. At one point, I was struggling with something with my husband in our marriage, and I didn't really know how to explain to him what I was feeling and the position that I was feeling like I was in with regards to, it was in fact a bereavement related issue, because CPN wasn't really in existence when Ben was alive. But I was able to put 2 videos through this bundling feature that's on our website into a text message and send him the 2 videos and say, I don't really know how to talk to you about this, but these 2 parents are talking about how I feel right now. And he was able to watch those videos in his own time, have his own thoughts, and then we were able to come back together afterwards and have a dialogue about it. We've had other families that have used the tool in advance of doctor's appointments to say, we're talking about a feeding tube for my child. Here are, a couple of things parents are expressing some of my concerns. Is it okay if we talk about this when I come? Or other families who have used both our written guide on CPN and some of the videos to say to quite frankly, their in-laws, you're not really understanding our family experience right now. Maybe if you watch these 2 videos, it will help, and it will have us talk about it. So the app has this really great feature, but you can find everything on our website as well. I also wanted to tell you about another tool that CPN has, which is it's an entirely different website. It's called NeuroJourney.org. And NeuroJourney, and I believe this is applicable to your community, is for parents who are caring for children with severe neurological conditions. So where the primary source of a lot of the complications that they're experiencing actually originates in the brain, and the implications that their disease has on the brain. And this resource that CPN put together does have more medical information on it. So we worked with physicians across the country to produce content that will talk not in extreme detail, because the range of severe neurological disorders is very broad, but give you an overview of what you might experience, for example, in GI with your child. And at the same time, because CPN really believes that palliative care and the practice of palliative aware medicine can make a big difference in the family experience, it marries sort of what the palliative voice or approach is to that complication. Here's the best example I can give you. My son struggled with constipation constantly during his disorder. The GI doctor, of course, was trying to solve that problem by giving him things like Marilax. The nutritionist was trying to solve it through his diet. And no one was talking to me about how actually the constipation was originating in his brain in some part because his brain just wasn't sending the message
True.
to go to the bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
And so NeuroJourney does all of that. It sort of connects all those dots together. But alongside of that, we have a companion text, which is indicated by the heart next to it, where it talks about things like how difficult it is to change a adult-sized diaper in public, or that it's okay if you need to give your child a suppository so you can take your other two children to the mall without worrying about a BM arriving when you're just standing in Target, So it sort of puts together those emotional experiences that you might be having alongside of some of the medical complications that you're probably facing and dealing with every day. So it's just another resource that we've structured for a unique audience.
Yes, yes, yes. No, this is so helpful. So I just want to make sure that I tell my parents where to go, my caregivers. So Courageous Parents Network, we have all kinds of resources, not necessarily all related to neurological disorders. Whereas NeuroJourney, we're definitely just talking to that audience, and it really focuses on that piece.
Yes, that's entirely the case. You have gotten that definition correct.
Okay, no, that's good to know, and it's almost brand new, correct? NeuroJourney?
It is just released at the end of November, so it is almost brand new.
Yes. How did you guys identify that this was an opportunity to expand and focus on that? Because that's very neat that it's only Courageous Parents Network is only 10 years old, but you're constantly like looking for ways to advance and serve families better.
So we have the privilege of listening to a lot of families, and we have the privilege of listening to a lot of physicians. Courageous Parents Network has, in its history, done a lot of work in the medical community and participated in research, and we have let that guide and inform us. Listening for the unmet needs out there in the rare disease community, in the psychosocial and emotional realm, which is where we live. And of course, if we have an agenda, it is to say that palliative care, and maybe we can talk about that later, is really a game changer for so many families experiencing this life that we're living. At CPN, and again, this goes back to you have to name it to tame it, what we started to realize was there were a lot of inflection points that were common across diseases for families. So, for example, and here's another word that we encourage families to learn, which is baseline. So where is your baseline is sort of where is your child today? What does that look like, both medically, and what does it look like sort of in the day-to-day experience? So when you define your child, what a good day looks like is very important part of baseline. But as in with many rare diseases, the baseline shifts. Often over time, unfortunately, downward, but a lot of times it can do sort of this. We're going along, it might go down a little bit, then you go along, you might go down, it might go up a little bit, then you go along again. And each one of those changes creates a different inflection point where families feel stress, where you have to reorient to what's going on in your world, either incorporating some new therapy or a new doctor or changing your routine. But all of that causes you to have to reorient. After you've had this period of orientation, you start to navigate forward, and that's when it sort of feels like things are going along kind of smoothly. You're putting in place all of your things that you need. And unfortunately, what we started to realize is that families are in a constant cycle of orienting, navigating, and then sort of moving forward, but they're flipped back into orienting again because something else in their child's experience has triggered it. Or even in your own family experience. Reorienting can be if your spouse needs a new job, or, any of those other regular life things that cause everybody else to reorient are going on for all of us as well. And in doing that, we identified that this is particularly the occurrence for children with SNIs, which is the bulk of families who have rare diseases. And so we thought it would be helpful, and we were approached by some physicians to bring together a website that allowed for that palliative aware care to be presented alongside of some of the medical complications that these families are experiencing with their child. Because sometimes it is the case that the family isn't aware of both of those things occurring all of the time. And then sometimes it is the experience that the clinicians are not aware of what's actually going on in your regular life outside of the specialty that you're talking to them about. And the tool brings that conversation together.
Yes. So let's talk a little bit. You mentioned palliative care, right? And I think that's a word that if you never heard it before and then it comes up during an appointment, it can be almost, or at least it was for me, it was kind of like, what is this? I wanted to know, what does this mean? Are we just getting worse? Are we getting better? Like I had a lot of questions, and sometimes I didn't know how to ask those questions. And for my situation, we are now on hospice care, but palliative care was one of the best decisions that we made for my family and our situation and our timing. And I like to say, kind of like situation has to be right for the family and the right place. But I want to hear from you, because when people approach me and ask me, I said, it had to be the right time, the right place, and we had to talk about it as a family. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about palliative care.
So I want to start with what you sort of began with, which is most people want to run away when they hear that word.
Run away. Run away is more accurate. Yes.
Some of it is because of the way it's presented out there in the world. It's mostly always referred to in conjunction with hospice care, which everybody understands is end of life care. Palliative care is really something different. And I like to tell people that palliative care is about living well. And to the best of your capacity. And it focuses on things like making each day the best day it can be, regardless of what that means or where it sits. And that's not something we should be afraid of. That's actually something we should run toward. And so when you start to think about it in palliative care in that regard, it gets much easier to understand how they can help. So, palliative care does do things like medically look at pain and symptom management. So that's their primary focus. So helping your child being the most comfortable they can be every day. They focus on making your child have the best day that they can. And that might mean working with different specialists to work out how they're communicating about different complications that your child is experiencing, which they're very good, skilled listeners and conveyors of information, these palliative care doctors and nurses. So they're a great person to have on your team. But palliative care also looks at, you can't separate the child from the family unit, right? So they're looking at your whole family unit, and they're asking the questions that are going to help you determine your goals of care for your child, figure out how you need physicians to interact with you, being a interpreter when that interaction isn't going so well, understanding who your child is. And I think this is really important because in the grand, litany of specialists we all see, you might get one or two that actually understand who your child is. But palliative care physicians are really adept at identifying and relating to who your child is. And that's who we want all the doctors to see that person.
Yes.
And we need somebody who can help us. Rare disease families spend a lot of time being interpreters for their children, and that is both a privilege and a burden. And palliative care doctors often can sit in that space with you and help you figure out what you need for your child, but also help interpret to those medical professionals.
Yes. And I try not to bring out my family, but you're just saying so many things that I want people to know that it is true what you're saying. Like, I want people to believe it, because communication got better the moment we joined palliative care. Not only how doctors communicated to us during appointments, how they listened to us, and they started talking to each other more.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's something that I always wanted, so I didn't know I had to ask for it. Like, I was the middleman before, running around and saying, this doctor said this doctor says this, and let's go back and forth, but this doctor said that. And it was draining. I got tired. I felt like, what if I get it wrong? And then immediately after palliative care, it was like everyone's a little bit more calm and listening to each other and paying closer attention. And they were speaking more to each other. My appointments started being like back to back the same day versus like going back the same week multiple times, very different times. And it was just not convenient because my son suffers from daily seizures, and having to get him out in the car, medications, feedings, it was just very chaotic, and it didn't have to be like that. And that's the thing. It's just like, there are things that definitely can improve how we live day to day and how it is day to day. And you mentioned something a little bit while ago, and keeping his baseline more stable, right? By adding less like environmental factors and chaos in it, because we already don't have control of so many things. So the things that we can have control over does make life a little bit better, in my opinion, and for my family.
Yes, and palliative care, as you point out, helps to smooth out all those wrinkles and identifies where can we eliminate some of these variables so that this child is living their best day today. And we have a lot of information on CPN about palliative care. We have one video that I recommend you watch if you're scared, and it's just called "What is Palliative Care Really?" And it gives you a gentle introduction, but you can also listen to palliative care clinicians on our website talk about the job and the role that they have. You can listen to other parents, including myself, talk about how palliative care changed the trajectory of their child's life. And I think the more you hear and listen, you'll become less afraid. Now, let's talk about the reality that palliative care is not available to everyone, everywhere. And this is a real unfortunate part of our medical system, both in the United States and worldwide. So what I also like to tell parents is, first of all, you don't need a palliative care provider to have somebody that practices palliative aware medicine and listens and can be that conduit for you. You might have the burden of identifying it, and sometimes families have access to a complex care department, which might include a palliative care provider. Most often it does, and they do things like streamline appointments. But it may be, like in the case of Blythe, who founded CPN, it was her pediatrician that sort of practiced this palliative aware medicine and could speak to families about their goals of care and the things they want for their child. But I also want to say that when you equip yourself with understanding all of this language and really exploring your feelings, parents have the capacity to develop their own internal palliative voice. I think you probably know this. You know when you need to not press your child in a certain kind of way because what it might mean for them. You understand that as you're looking at adding another medication or a different intervention, that it has layers of impact, and that you as the parent have to look at all those layers and evaluate them. And all of that is starting to help you form your own goals of care and your internal sort of palliative voice that you can listen to. And that's why we do what we do at CPN, so that you can go on and watch and learn from other parents and sort of hone that internal muscle inside of yourself.
Yes. No, that's amazing. And I'm so happy everyone's listening to this podcast because it's just so insightful. And I have one last question for you, because I feel like we need, and we talked about this, we need a part 2. We need the part two to continue talking. We've talked about this. But my question for you is, what advice would you give to parents who have recently received a rare disease diagnosed for their children, and maybe even think about Jennifer yourself when you first got diagnosed? What would you tell her if you, without the experience and all the knowledge that you have, what would you tell a newly diagnosed parent?
I would say, first of all, I'm a type A person, so that's kind of important to understand. But I would say slow down. You don't need to know all of the information immediately. In my own son's disease, diagnosed at 15 months old, he presented like a 15-month-old. But when I looked into the future of what his disease would bring forward to him, it was very scary. I don't know that I needed to know that in the first, weeks after his diagnosis, and all that it meant, because what I needed to learn how to do was to still just look at my child and see him for the little boy that I knew I already loved and needed. So slow down and take your time in gathering your information. Give yourself grace to feel the feelings, because they're going to come back around even if you don't feel them right away. So try to slow enough to give yourself the grace to say, it's a crappy day today. I am feeling sad about this. I am feeling angry about everything that is now happening. I am feeling defeated. Whatever that feeling is, give yourself the grace. As I said before, name it to tame it. Even if it's just to write it on a piece of paper so that someday it's there for you to relook at, just slow down enough to give yourself grace. Seek resources. So, we want our pediatrician to be that first line of a defense for us and to be the partner in this journey. I know I wanted it because I had an older son who already knew my family. But if that person isn't the right person for you, instinctually after the diagnosis, you probably know it. Find somebody else because you're going to need that partner. Find your families that you can relate to is very important, but know when you have to separate them yourself from them, because again, it can be overwhelming. And because at a diagnosis, we feel such urgency, the opportunity to feel overwhelmed is really ripe. So try to mitigate that. And again, lean into CPN and look at the resources. Again, I encourage you because, again, you can do it in the middle of the night when the demons show up, and then you can turn it off and take bits. And I always like to tell, we do offer bereavement resources on our website, but usually I like to say to people, and this dates me, that they're below the fold, because like in newspaper terms, anything that's sort of like on the top half of the newspaper is what everybody reads, and below the fold is sort of but it's there if you need to. I mean, I was that parent that in some ways wanted to look ahead to help myself feel stronger.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that was always necessarily a good thing, but type A, that's what we do, right? We need everything all the time. But that would be my biggest advice to parents. Like, really.
That's wonderful. I cannot thank you enough for spending time with us at the Rare Advocates, just really speaking to us, not only about your resources, but sharing a little bit about your personal experience, because it only makes it much more meaningful that it's coming for someone that understands what's going on. Jennifer, I cannot thank you enough for your time. We will be sharing everything, every link available that Jennifer mentioned in the description box. Is there any last words to say goodbye to the listeners?
So I think the thing I want to say to you is that I am also a tool in your toolbox now. And I say that to parents, they need to gather all of their resources and put them in a toolbox. So CPN certainly can be a resource, but I'm here, and you can always reach me at connect@courageousparentsnetwork.org. It gets to me. That's where it goes. And so if you're watching this and you have a question or you need just a little more guidance to say, hey, this is where I am, can you just point me to the one thing I should look at or the one thing I should read? I'm happy to curate for you. So, we're alongside you in this journey, and that's really what I want to say.
You are so wonderful. You already have so much work, but we are thankful because I'm sure our parents going to reach out. Thank you so much, Jennifer. You have a great day, and thank you for being here today with us.
Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.